All right. Sweet. Hey, so apologies for that. Technical difficulties, internet dropout, 5-year-old smartphone that hasn't is telling me I've got too much data taken up. So gotta free up some stuff on there. But oh, and brought a special guest. Brought my coach, Hoss the boss, in here. Yeah, that's right, buddy. You okay? Just a little cold. Um, he's usually in here for workouts, but so he's a little confused right now. But come here. Oh, look at this. Say hi to peeps. Um, so anyway, it's actually it wasn't intended, but actually kind of ironic that he's in here and we're talking about agility because you know a lot of folks, for a lot of the athletes that we've been working with the last couple of weeks, I learned this morning that it's been 8 weeks with this whole isolation, quarantine, or however you're referring to it, which quite frankly doesn't really feel that long. Um, Not that it feels a lot longer, but I guess just time passes. But so we're getting to the point now to where, for the first 8 weeks, we took a lot of time to focus specifically on speed development because, this is such a unique time that for a lot of athletes, they don't normally get this much free time away from training and competitions to be able to focus solely on speed development, that they're constantly going from one training to the next, to the next, and the next. So this has been, like a true recovery time that they can just solely focus on speed development. Now we're getting to the point that, okay, we've got that speed, let's start to apply it to different angles and whatnot. And as we start to do that, one of the big things that we're certainly trying to emphasize is make sure that we're using the right tools and using them in the right ways. All right, so I think with agility, probably the most popular thing, definitely the one that's brought up the most is the agility ladder. And the key to remember there is it's just like anything else, right? It's no different. Agility ladder or any of those tools and gadgets is no different than a barbell versus a kettlebell versus dumbbell or sandbag. They've all got their purpose, and as long as they're used appropriately, then you'll get the benefit out of it. But if you use the right tool in the wrong way, you're not going to see that application or that transition onto the field that you want to get. So in terms of the agility ladder, that's something to, if you have access to something like that, or that's just kind of your go-to thing that you enjoy using, then just make sure that you're using it the right way. And like anything else, you can always send us videos, and I'm happy to send some pointers or draw up, do some highlights and whatnot. But keep in mind, right, whatever it is, whether it's cones or agility ladder or some other kind of training square, something like that, make sure that you keep in mind what the ultimate goal is, right? And the primary goal for any athlete that's trying to do agility training, right? There's no world championship. Well, there might be a world championship in speed ladder, but for most of us that are using it, the ultimate goal is to have whatever skill that we develop there transfer onto the playing field. All right. And so, staying on the topic of speed ladders, I see so many athletes that do those incorrectly. For me, most of the agility ladder work is going to be done in a gym, like in a weight room or in a basketball court type of area. And I always like doing it that way because it really exposes the incorrect form or incorrect technique. So on a basketball court, for example, watching a lot of young athletes especially doing that, the more squeaking and the more scuffing that I hear and that I'm observing, right, the more it actually just kind of drives me nuts, because that's just demonstrating, it's highlighting that incorrect form. Now, the reason that's happening, is if you watch, the athletes are so focused on hitting the square, not hitting the rope, and going with speed that they actually end up running up on their toes, right? So they actually just get up, and it's almost kind of like knives just poking into the floor, and hence you get a lot of the squeaking. The athletes get their ankles are at a bad position. Their chest tends to get over their feet, which they kind of get that momentum going and kind of tripping over themselves. Um, and which now think about that, right? If you watch an athlete doing that and think about how that would translate into a basketball game, into a soccer game, or any other team sport, you would never see an athlete, moving like that, or trying to move like that, or wanting to move like that. And so, again, if it is an agility ladder, make sure that you're doing it properly, right? I always try and aim for that your feet should be tapping off the ground, not digging into the ground. Um, and again, if you're doing it on a court, or on a hard surface or something like that, you should hear that kind of patting on the ground, not scuffing and hard slamming. I see more and more teams using speed ladders or some form of it in team warm-ups, right? So like soccer teams, rugby teams, whatever, using agility ladders in their team warm-up on the field. And if that's what the players need mentally to kind of switch on or whatever, hey, that's fine, that's fair enough. But I always challenge, look at the ground afterwards, and if it looks like some some wild animals have been kind of scavenging around, or digging around in the grass, that's probably not a good sign, because that probably means that their feet are the athletes' feet and their cleats, their boots are digging in and just tearing up the ground as they're going through it, which is not ideal. Again, think about, as they're going through it, is that really how they should be moving and trying to perform when they're on the field? And chances are they're not, right? So that's one of the things that agility ladders always kind of frighten me a little bit, and I tend to, I'll use them maybe for some teaching, maybe early on, just to get the foot pattern or the foot strike, but not put too much emphasis on it. So what does that leave? Well, in terms of just a few basic drills or basic exercises that we like to use, we just kind of call it the B drill, the zigzag drill. And actually, I'll go for the whiteboard here. Sorry, not the don't have the fancy technology or anything. But the key with the agility stuff as well, I think a lot of athletes, it's almost like 0 to 60 in 5.2, right? You say agility, and they immediately just start going as fast as they can. So all they're doing is just highlighting those poor habits that they already have. They're not really doing anything to correct it or to improve upon it. And so, just like with speed development and just speed training, same thing with the agility as well. If you're really trying to develop a better step, better lateral or change of direction movement, like anything else, you got to slow it down, right? You got to get to what we'd refer to as a learning speed, where you're probably going to be slower than 65% of your max speed, to make sure that you understand what that movement should feel like coming into the turn or coming into the cut. All right, to make sure that you're getting a good clean foot plant or foot placement as you're lowering your center of gravity and getting ready to change and power off, because that's not it's not science or anything, or it's not mind-blowing or anything. That change of direction is where a lot of injuries occur, and then because the athlete doesn't have the range of motion or the stability to control the amount of speed or force that's being generated in that cut, and so that's why you've really got to slow it down and kind of almost reintroduce that movement in that as you're trying to develop that skill. So so two things, right? The first one, we just call it a simple curved run, okay? And you can do this. You can do this any number of ways, right? But so the first one here, and you can get over the other menus. But the first one here is just taking a set of cones, right? Making a 5x5, 5x5 circles, and just going kind of figure eight, right? And the figure eight, I will say this, right? Figure eight is pretty challenging for young athletes or even experienced athletes for the first time. But so make sure that you go through, and again, right, going in a controlled manner. That way you start to feel the curves a little bit. And I know that sounds like a race car driver or something like that, hug the turns and that sort of thing. But ultimately, I mean, that's kind of what you're going for a little bit. Now you can, I've got the figure eight here. You can mix this up. You can start with just one circle and just going around there. Maybe you can do a half eight finished on a straightaway as opposed to come back through, something like that. That's something that a couple of athletes are starting to work with and starting to see some benefits. And I'll give a huge credit to Ed Costner, huge friend and mentor of mine, who really kind of, demonstrated me the importance of that type of drill, that type of exercise, not just for, getting your body position and how it works with the change, but also, he uses it with a lot of his bigger athletes, a lot of throwers, linemen, rugby forwards, in terms of strengthening the ankles, right? Getting a good, like you can imagine on those turns that your ankle's going to have a certain level of mobility, but it's got to have the stability to stay strong within that. So he uses it for that, and of course that's been a good tool for me to use as well. The other one, we just call it kind of zigzag running, right? Whoa. So again, technical difficulties again, sorry. So again, if you're thinking about zigzag, right, the cool thing is you can do all kinds of crazy patterns with this one, right? You can go with your chest and shoulders always facing forward. You can go with your chest, turning to face each cone, so your body physically turns 90 degrees. But this is the one especially that you're talking about being able to control that lateral movement and really feel that push, as you're changing direction. And so, sorry, testing out a new mic today, so let me ditch that for a second. So let me see if I can get you a good visual. But if you imagine on that zigzag, all right, you imagine on that zigzag as I'm approaching the cone. All right, so you see the cone. As I'm approaching the cone, I want to make sure that I'm staying over the ankle, right, and sinking the hip in, so I'm preparing to drive off in the opposite direction. And that's where a lot of athletes, I know the video's cutting off, so I apologize for that in advance. But what you tend to see is a lot of athletes who don't have that stability and that strength to control that movement, control that force, is they'll start to lean over, right? You'll see their center of gravity get way out here, and then they have to kind of pull themselves back in. So another reason why we say go slow, right? Ease your way into it like any other skill, is to make sure that you're able to get that plant on the inside of the foot, right? It rolls in, the knee stays over the foot, the hip sinks in as well. What ends up happening too much at this point is that the athlete doesn't have the mobility at the hip to sink, and so they end up dropping here, right, which is lengthening the hamstring, right, putting more strain on the hamstring, the low back, and then they end up kind of doing a straight leg deadlift or RDL to come out of it, and then they wonder why they get strained hamstrings all the time, right? So it's about coming in, right, getting that good strong placement here, bam, and then power to drive off the other way. All right, so that's enough. I think that's enough demo for today. And Coach Renee, I see you on here. I know that most of your athletes aren't going to be cutting and changing direction, but all goes the same for for martial arts as well, right? In terms of generating that power to get the kicks or get the takedowns or whatever. And I still remember some of those sessions with you all those years ago, so hadn't forgotten about you. But that's the big thing with that's the big thing with the agility, right? Is like any other skill, it's got to be it's got to be learned at a slow pace, right? To improve the technique, and then slowly start building up from there. You can't just go out and go 100% with it, just because change of direction is supposed to be quick, right? You've got to learn that skill at that learning pace, and then stack on top of good technique. So that's the big message for today is as you're incorporating agility into it, right? Just think about it. Just going out, just because it's agility training doesn't mean it has to be as fast as possible, right? Agility training could be that slow technical piece of making sure of refining your technique to make sure that your foot placement, your hip placement, everything else is where it needs to be. It's aligned in the right way, right? That way you're stacking a good stable base, a good strong base on top of that quick movement. And then that's the other thing, right? Is that, or on the flip side of that, you see the athletes that go out and they're doing agility or change of direction training, and they're going so quick with bad technique that you could almost count, right? Like visibly count how long their foot is on the ground, which is defeating the purpose, right? They're coming in, they're coming into the cone, bam, and then it's like they have to load and then change that direction. They can't just come in and set and drive from there. So that's something to be careful about as well. If you get the sense that you're spending too much time on the ground, that you're not getting that snap, right, or that punch as you're changing direction, then might be time to either slow things down, get back to basics, or or get some outside help. So starting to get on a roll, on a rant there for a little bit. Coach is getting a little impatient back there, but that's the big thing for agility, right? We just kind of demonstrated or drew up two simple drills: the curved running and the zigzag running. Of course, there's a lot of variations that you can pull off of that. You can do the zigzag going backwards. You can change 180 halfway through. You can go forward or lateral, whatever it is. But again, it's the key principles of the quote unquote agility training, having that good stable base, right? Having the mobility in your ankle, but also the stability around it, to be able to withstand that speed and that force in those cuts. Because otherwise, if you don't have that, you're just stacking, or building the house on sand, as they say. So that's it for agility. And again, a lot more theory than it was just kind of practical stuff to take away. But if you are looking for help in things like that, are looking for some more ideas, as always, leave a comment, send us a message, send us an email, universalsportstrength@gmail.com. Again, right, cherry on top for listening to this long. Send us an email or a DM with the title KG2KM Squad, right? If you're interested in joining our special group, our exclusive group that gets all the extra resources, tools, tips, and strategies for improving their training environment. Other than that, hope everybody's doing well. Getting ready to, it looks like the light is shining brighter and brighter for more and more of us, depending on what state you're in, or what sport you play. Shout out to mixed martial arts, the MMA community that looks like they're finding ways to, or at least the the big card, at least the UFC, that's finding ways to to get back into the groove of things and stay connected with their audience. And yeah, if you have any other ideas, suggestions, questions for the team huddles, then feel free to let me know. Be happy to address those in future huddles. And yeah, stay healthy, keep working.